consistent help that is what's needed in the ecosystem.
Awesome. It looks like we got recording. So,
yep.
So just to recap, we started recording just a little bit late. This is the package maintenance working group session. I'm Wes. Glenn and I are hosting today. And so we're a couple slides in, but you know, that's the way it is. So we're talking about tooling now. So we started a GitHub organization called PKG.js. It was sort of a rogue action to start, just to get some of the things going. We had, I think the first tool that was created in the node.org. Partly because of that, the naming was, you know, it was trying to find a name on the public NPM scope, or sorry, not on a scope, just on the global namespace. So it was a little bit harder to find naming. So we said, hey, let's maybe pick a scope that we can use and manage by the team. So that's PKG.js. So it's github.com/PKG.js and npmjs.com/ oh, what's the org URL? Is it /org/ or is it just /@ PKG.js? Maybe.
I'll get the slides marked up with that on and make them public.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we started a few tools. So some of these examples here, we have one that is called Will I Break You, WIDY. And so this one will help folks test their dependence. Sorry, yes, their dependence, not their dependencies, right? So this is if they are a dependency on an upstream package, that will help identify and run tests as you're going to release new versions. We have, I think, a few things in the dependence space, which is trying to identify and give you back a list of your dependents. And then we have a tool for node versions. So this one will give you back based on, so one of the initiatives we started, I think Dom was the initiator here, is identifying common aliases that align with the node version releases. So we've got like LTS maintained, and the idea there is having those aliases will be used in a bunch of different contexts. The support spec that Glenn was talking about previously, things for CI. I've been working with Jordan and what's his real name? Shadowspawn is his GitHub handle, who he runs N, and then Jordan runs NVM. So getting these aliases supported across those. But then the underlying thing is, what does that alias map to? So we have a module that maps the aliases to the different versions based on the release JSON and the schedule. So you can say, like, what is the current LTS? Or you can actually go post or in the future and say, what will the LTS be in, you know, later this year? And so then it returns those. So you could do things with automation around that. So that's just a couple of examples. There's a bunch of others going on in there. Feel free to go and browse. And we are always looking for contributors who want to help.
So one of the most discussed and loved topics is dependencies, and this just wasn't a slide so I could use a penguin. Perhaps it was. I found this really cute penguin, this most dependent picture I could find. And one of the things we did, we talked to NPM, and later in the year they said perhaps the fourth quarter they would start on providing an API which would give dependents with, you know, indications of the magnitude of importance of those dependencies, like downloads and so forth. And we think that's really, really important for maintenance going forwards. So what we'd like to talk about now quickly is, what are the practical ways we can help? Okay, so currently we're engaged in the Node.js module, and Wes is going to talk about that in a second. But I only got involved in December in 2019 at the Montreal conference when Wes was appealing for help. We've taken this one project as a first candidate, and I'm going to hand over now straight to him to talk a little bit about our practical case of helping out a project. So Wes?
Yeah, absolutely. So also, as we were bootstrapping, we came up with a plan for how we're going to operationalize these different things we're working on. So we said we're going to start with some pilot projects, ones where there was specific need in the ecosystem for help. And so I, being one of the members of the Express project, said that's us, please. And so since then, we've done a few things, and they've actually been incredibly successful. And I want to thank folks like Glenn who have stepped up and really helped recruit people. So the triage effort is sort of the most impactful one so far. So we kicked it off with the help of Jaresh, who is a contributor in Node and also now a team member of the triage team. And we got a bunch of people at the last collaborator summit. Well, I guess that was part of the main conference, but anyway, since then we have onboarded, I think, like 12 or 14 triage team members. Not everyone is as active, but we've got a few that have really just stepped up and done such great work. So basically, we as the team sort of built a document on what it takes to become a triage member, how it works. And the goal of that, testing it out in Express, is that we can then take those docs, up-level them with the package maintenance working group, and use the same sort of template for other ecosystems and say, look, we tried this out in Express. It worked really well. Babel, are you looking to grow your support base? Whatever projects might come to us in the future, we can say, hey, look, here's a thing that worked really well for Express. Just copy and paste. Here's the section in the contributor, .md, and you're ready to go. Hopefully, we'll also have some automation around how to manage that stuff. Like Glenn was saying and shows in the slide here, onboarding and offboarding. There's orchestration work that just needs to be done when you're getting people on, and then also when they say, hey, I'm no longer want to be a part. And then recruitment is obviously very important in there. The team is really good about putting the word out. It's not as much that there's formal help being done. It's just, people come to the package maintenance working group and say, hey, I'm looking for help recruiting. And then, we as the members have our contacts of people that might come to us asking, hey, I'm looking to get into open source. So we also provide just like a group of people who are helping facilitate that recruitment.
So we all know that one of the most common issues we have is getting long-term commitment, and long-term means different things to different people. Our communities tended to coalesce around, let's say, the latest fashionable projects.
Right.
And this mainly is a reflection of the fact that many of the contributors are very young and still in the early stages of their career. And when they make a commitment, it can't be helped. They cannot make that forever. And so we equally need to have a pipeline on each one of these projects. People need to think of it more like the enterprise does, people coming through, coming on, and coming off. And that's something I think we need to actually focus on. So moving on to the next one is, how can we help each other? So we've told you a little bit about the package maintenance committee. So firstly, if you are maintaining a project, do you align with some of the things we've been talking about, the proposals, and do you believe that what we're proposing is correct? And we want to offer help and tooling in a general way, and we also want to be an area that writes, governance and good best practices. The group is meant to have a broad remit, and anyone is welcome. So if you have an issue that doesn't easily fall into the other working groups and the community would benefit from it, I'm proposing that the package maintenance committee might be the place for you. So in a broader way, how do we help the ecosystem? So I have my own particular view on this. So everyone here is already probably contributing in some way, and just contribution shouldn't be the only thing that's measured. As I said, the triage team is set up explicitly just to answer questions on Express, because so many questions are asked on a daily basis. And we want a healthy and vibrant community for each one of these modules. So what we also understand is that it's a minuscule number of proportion of the community that's actually contributing back again. And we need to reach out and engage more of the community that are not engaged. And my first suggestion is that that is actually more important than writing code at the moment for a lot of very widely used modules. I think you should actually think rather about how to maintain your health than how to add in the latest features. So historically, a great deal has been placed on the development of software and less on its sustainability. And I think we actually need to change that sort of ratio a little bit more and start engaging sort of the medium and large size enterprise. Most of us work at those. So I'd like to suggest that sustainability and direction and stability are very, very important, and that the enterprise wants to actually get involved, but we haven't engaged them quite accurately or in a way that works for them. So I'd like, as a takeaway for everybody, to actually go away and actually think about how they can actually engage other people more. So how do we do that? How do we actually engage? How do we keep this maintenance going? As I've said, I don't think for established projects, we should actually stop thinking about new features and start thinking about engagement, and perhaps coding not to be the priority, evangelizing, and perhaps the enterprise as number one sort of partners, like functions as first-class citizens. Well, perhaps engagement should be a first-class citizen too, because there have been other ecosystems in the past that have grown as rapidly, perhaps not as rapidly as this, and have fallen. And we need to start looking at the health of the bigger system as those maintainers reach certain points in their life where they can't maintain. Over to you, Wes.
Sorry, I went over and was trying to find the mute button. So I think that's the end of the slides. So we're going to go into our Q&A, and I'm the only person who's added questions. So
I got add questions. Can I just list them out?
Yes, that would be great. Yes, right. You can't add questions. You are driving. Be careful. Don't get distracted.
Honestly, I only have one question. I'm really interested in your triage effort. Maybe a bit more detail on that would be useful, because what I've seen in the past, at least speaking with some of higher profile maintainers, is what I've heard is that supporting these, especially newer users, takes up a significant effort. And that's especially on a large project where you may have a higher volume of, issues, people looking for support, looking for help, which may sometimes be redirected to Stack Overflow rather than, an issue tracker. And that burns people out. So I'm wondering how you're categorizing, how you're closing, what kind of practices did you establish there? Because this is also the question that came up in one of yesterday's meetings on Node. Actually, no, there was a whole meeting, right, on Node's issue tracker and the size of it, and may just need some sort of better practices around that.
Yeah, so I think so. Let me actually share my screen, and I'll show some of what we have. I wasn't really prepared to share my screen, so you'll see probably like hundreds of open tabs. Actually, not too bad. So,
while he's doing that, I'll go ahead and say that after the meeting yesterday, which was on the backlog in Node, I did open officially an issue and get Node Core proposing that they have their own triage team. So that's
yeah. If we can share effort and multi-purpose some of the stuff we are working on to work on both, I think that would be great. And also that would just really establish this practice And I think, you know, many more maintainer groups would probably be willing to adopt it with saying both Express and Node use this. Like that's, I think a shining, that would be a shining example of like, yes, this is a great best practice. So I was going to show a couple of things. Actually, I should have done, my muscle memory goes to the discussions repo, which is another thing that is great to have. If you have a lot of repos like Express does, having a place that is a public, where we use the issue tracker as a discussions. I know GitHub has their discussions thing, but we found the issues are really successful for that. So let me pop open our, this is in contributing. So we added a section on becoming a triager here. And yeah, so there's two different pieces here. So this one is sort of the actual, just like, how does the process work? So what do you do to become a triager? So basically you open a PR following this pattern. And I believe we have, did we make a template for this yet?
Are you sharing your screen? I'm sharing your screen.
Oh, am I not sharing my screen?
I'm seeing you.
It says I'm,
Do other people see the screen?
I see your screen, Wes.
I do see it.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe, Glenn, did you maybe pin?
Okay, I've got several windows. Hang on.
Okay.
I think the org-wide issue templates are still work in progress.
Yes, I think you're correct, right? Because we talked about that last week on the TC, didn't we? Okay, well, so in the future, we will have issue templates that will help do this. But basically, it's pretty straightforward. So we have 3 orgs, which is a little bit different than a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons why we had such difficulty in the past managing it, figuring out who was doing what on what. And so here we tell people they can request the triager role on 1 or all 3 or 2 or whatever that most inspires them. But basically, they just copy and paste this, plop in their name. And then somebody I guess right now it's just the TC, but we will have triage team managers. I think I added Jaresh on that. So we'll have to see what maybe I can check on that. Well, I don't want to, I'm not sure exactly if there's any private stuff as soon as I go in there with security or, you know, team membership if people keep it private, but, so I won't go in and show that. But basically, they just open a PR. Somebody comes by and says, sure, merges, goes and adds them to the team on all 3 orgs. We would like to get some automation around that. So there was some discussion about making a GitHub action. And I think I maybe started a repo in PKG.js, but I haven't made any progress. So if anybody is interested in stepping up on that, that'd be great. And then once they get access. So access looks like, let's go find an issue. So here we have somebody opened 3 days ago an issue and said, hey, look, I think I found, I'm guessing a memory leak here, memory increase until 100%. Sounds like a memory leak. And they gave some details. And Glenn came in and said, hey, this looks like a question. So we have a few standard tags that we use, and these are standardized across the orgs. I have to move this over so I can see the, oh, it won't, I have to move it to the other side of the screen. So we have a few. Question is one of our most popular. So being Express, that's a lot of new to Node people. Sometimes they're just, you know, I don't even have a package JSON yet, and I tried to run npm install Express and it's erroring. Like, you know, there's lots of just question style things. So that's one of the most important ones. We also have awaiting more info is also a very common one. So somebody comes in and reports a bug. Oftentimes their bug report is really, you know, low on details. This one is great and has a ton of details. Many don't. So we have this awaiting more info. This is a great way to come in and say, we need something from you, you know, the user who reported it. And then we have discuss. So oftentimes question and discuss go together. These are things where it's not necessarily a bug report. Maybe this is a new feature and we say, hey, we think this might be a good idea. This one should use some discussion. If you have any input, both from the triage or TC or collaborators, but also just end users. If they have any ideas around it, that label is great to tag for things we want discussions on. We have duplicate. So we get tons of duplicates. Typically this one's used to also close out, and then people will, we coach the triage team to be respectful and nice and not, close and mark duplicate and not give any feedback. But we want people to feel like they're being heard. So oftentimes we'll say, hey, this looks like the same issue as here. I'm going to close this and mark it as duplicate. If you disagree and you think it's a different issue, feel free to reopen. All right, so we've had a bunch of discussions with the triage team about how to properly, and I say properly, how to be an open and welcoming community, right? We want people to feel really good when they come and open an issue on an Express project, that they're being helped. So that's a good one. And then we have good first contribution and help wanted. We actually added good first contribution. We used to use help wanted for the same kind of thing, but we added this because it's, subtly different. Like this is, help wanted could be a very large thing, right? This could be HTTP 2 and 3 support. Whereas good first contribution is usually smaller things. And then
I also think github.com has some logic around their browse explore features for those tags.
They do. It's actually pretty awesome. They added that. And so that's pretty much those are the ones that the triage team uses mostly, I think, right? Matt, do you have any?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Yeah, for the most part. I'd say definitely more labels than respond most of the time. One thing to note that I've noticed that we do differently than a lot of other open source projects that I've interacted with is that we don't use the bug label unless it's a verified reproducible bug, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, because we get a lot of bogus bug reports, like a lot. So,
yeah, I can imagine.
Go ahead, Dom.
And so any chance you managed to collect some metrics on like how did the issue tracker look before you started doing this and after you started doing this, and or at least does it at least feel that it's cleaner, more efficient? There's there's presumably there's the amount of incoming issues is the same, but do you manage to go through them in a faster way or something?
So this is the only thing that I have that I think is a meaningful metric. So at the conference in December, I built this, and it isn't being built regularly, but the status board had Doug at the top with about 400 and about the same 400 some. I was second most, and I had like 200 some. This is it as of like maybe 2 weeks ago. I don't know, maybe a little bit more. So this is 90 days worth of activity. And as you can see, the triage team has been just killing it, right? Like the numbers here, it used to go straight from Doug to me down to somebody with like 10, and they were not even a member of the project. Now we have a group of people who are regularly engaging in the project. Like Dresh here with the 109, and I think actually if we rebuilt this today, like I think John would be up pretty high too. And I think we'd have a few more of the triage team members showing up here. I just need to get the GitHub action working again. Because I think I built this locally and pushed. So that's the only metric I've actually looked at. I don't know if anybody else has looked at anything org-wide.
So
maybe GitHub has a chart somewhere of like open issues over time or something. No, I don't know.
That's a great question. Let me. I
can speak to Express Session, which is what I was looking at. So we all tried to pick one of the repos in Express. I chose Session. I can say that the number of issues is now flat since at least I've been looking at it, and that's 6 months. It may go up, down, one or two. We've tried to address them. Generally, what happens is we go in and we give advice. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes people want free advice. Often they just want somebody to listen to them, which is odd, but understandable. And we've managed to keep it down. There haven't really been any new issues. There have been PRs raised. Because of the maturity of the project, a lot of PRs are for things that we have to actually question whether people really want them or not. And so there's a lot of discussion with some of the PRs, and often I ask, we're doing due diligence on a well-used project. Can you show me that it works, or that it? And after I do that for a bit, if it doesn't progress, then a maintainer will step in and probably close it. That's what my experience has been. Sometimes, features have been asked for that just not wanted, really, not widely wanted. But we have managed to keep session down to about 33, 34 ever since I've been doing it, I think February. And there are questions that they're open there almost daily. There's usually one or so a day, and that's where I've been concentrating. I will go in and mark the Express ones question. I looked at that performance one and said, no, I don't think that one's for me just yet. I have too many on this repo to cope with. And that's one of the problems. There are just so many questions that I don't feel bad about not writing, up for people, because you can only do so much, each day, reasonable. That's why you need quite a lot of triages. And we're trying to build up a team, a pipeline, so that people can come on, learn a bit about Express, learn a bit about the ecosystem, and at some point a year later, they can come off knowing that they've done something good, they've contributed. They say, I have made a significant contribution. It may not have been code. Yeah, that's why I want to emphasize that it's not just about writing code, because some of these projects are established and they're finished in some ways, and they may be going forwards, but there's a core team doing that need protection from general first-time issues, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I could have sworn we had a triageer guide. This is the thing I was going to look for. So we also have this, which I think would be a nice document to up level. So it also talks about the different tags we use. So, and needs triage actually isn't implemented everywhere. This is part of what the automation we talked about would be. We'd automatically tag needs triage. I think John shared a couple of boards. So John is another very active triager. And I think he uses a couple of GitHub searches to look for new issues and uses that as a needs triage. We're hoping to just automatically tag anything that comes in new as needs triage, and then automatically remove that when somebody does something on it, but we haven't done that yet. We also talk about how to pick which projects to look at. It includes a link to the status board, which is the only page we have that has every single repo listed out. And then just some other helpful hints. I think one of the things that happened a lot with the triage team as we were onboarding people was people were a bit intimidated. It's like, oh, I'm coming into Express. Like, what if I mess it up? Or what if I say something that's wrong? Or, what if I close an issue that shouldn't have been closed? Like, am I going to piss somebody off? Or am I going to, I don't know, there's a lot of like, I don't know, I don't contribute a lot to open source. Is this like, this seems like a very important project. Is this the right place for me to start? And so we tried to, talk about it in this doc, but also we've been, reiterating on a lot of the meetings, like, yes, start here. It doesn't matter where you start wherever you feel like you can contribute. And even if it's just labeling issues, that is super valuable. Like, you have no idea how Doug and I would spend probably 2 hours a day a piece for years. Doug spends way more than I do, but I think I spent probably about 2 hours a day for like 3 years or so with effectively just triaging. Maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours is a little excessive, but that's a lot of effort. And being able to have some folks who can come in with, they don't need to answer, I think I found a memory leak. Like, that's fine to say, hey, could you provide a reduced test case so that when somebody from, when Doug can come look at it, he will have more info. Like, otherwise Doug would have had to do that, right? And then he wouldn't have been spending his time debugging the memory leak. He would have been spending his time asking that question, right? And doing the roundabout. So just having those folks around has been incredibly helpful. And like, really reiterating to everybody, don't be intimidated. Start wherever you can. Even if it's 1 hour a month, you are still providing value to the ecosystem. So, so that was really something we had to focus on.
So Dominicus, do we have any contacts in GitHub? Because one of the things I'm trying to emphasize back to the enterprise is, please don't just value writing code. If we could value triaging, labeling, this stuff, the stuff that we're talking about, and for that to be seen as a contribution on GitHub, they can measure it. And when they do things,
sorry, go ahead.
It's not like, if labeling issues is not really measurable, you're not going to get any like, and some of the enterprises want to see what their personnel are doing. They want to see that they're contributing. And to begin with, that's a good way to start going on a major project and doing things. They want to see them contributing to existing projects.
Like, look at this. This is commits. Most of these triage efforts don't show up here. If you're trying to go to your boss and say, look, I'm helping with these projects we use, if all you're doing, and I say all you're doing, I should be very careful about how I say it, because I think I agree here. It is incredibly valuable. Where's the comment? Where is the, like in this little thing and on this, like where is the I labeled an issue? Like it's not present, right? But that value is incredibly high. And I do think, and you know, maybe we have some ins now with Rui working at GitHub, that he can find the right people to get that if they just added it to the darn board here, like that would just be so much better than what they have.
Seriously,
I'll bring it up. I'll bring it up.
So I brought it up at my enterprise saying, look, this is a thing they want an in. They say everyone has to start somewhere, because I'm picky about who I introduce, saying I don't want just a young developer. If they have a way in and it can be measured, they're very much into measuring things. Like usually it's very simple, it's profitability. This is something they can measure. If we can get those contributions on it, I think that would really help for me to get people onboarded. You know, they would see you're doing something. Yeah.
I think there's a big issue with somewhere with GitHub where people were listing these concerns. I think there was the last time around when the basically open source maintainers revolted and started screaming about new features. That's when we got the pull request templates and things like that. And I think there's a list somewhere where and this is a recurring request, isn't it?
Yep. I brought it up. I was on a call with, I guess it was around when NPM was being bought. They were doing a couple of like user interview things with people who are invested in this ecosystem. And I brought that up. You know, it's one of those things that it'll get done, I'm sure, someday, but they're busy changing master domain. So, you know, there's more important things in the world happening, like buying NPM. Anyway, I'm joking, but.
At the risk of hogging this session and making it all about triage, one last question. Did you run into situations where the triagers, let me phrase that in a nice way, where the people were unhappy with how their issues were triaged, and were there any conflicts or conflict resolution? Or it's just so far, not yet, happily?
I think from the triage side, no. I do think we've had growing pains as we are trying to onboard new people. You know, having an existing project that has been run in a certain way for a very long time, when you try to change that, there's challenges. So we're trying to adapt to the new, the goals that we've set out. I came in to the project and it already had a TC and I wasn't on it, right? And a few years of contributing and now I am, and I'm saying, hey, I want to make some changes. So one of the changes is the triage team. Well, people in the project, sometimes things, there's, contention, and we have had some of that. I think that the goal that we all need to remember is we're all working on this together. You can't just, especially bigger, more established projects like Express, I'm sure that Node would feel this way. you can't just come in and say, well, we know that there's a problem we're going to change overnight, right? You need to make sure that the people are in the room, that have the right discussions. And sometimes people are going to make mistakes, right? And you need to call them out, but you also need to, you know, respectfully help them learn from those. And I think that's definitely been something that we've had a couple of cases where, you know, there's been some contention, like, hey, I opened this, you know, PR to help fix this thing that people kept on asking a question for triage. Why did, you know, this specific case that I'm thinking of is, why did you just merge it as a separate commit and not, you know, merge my PR? And you know, that stuff's going to happen. You know, you're going to have to deal with it. I think that we have had a good resolution. You know, it wasn't perfect. Nothing's going to be, you know, when you have changes happening like this. And I think a lot of people aren't happy with the speed that Express is moving at. You know I'm not. I wanted it to move faster. But if you just try to push it to move faster with no, you know, without doing the legwork to make everybody comfortable with that pace, you know, there's going to be battles. And so I think that's one thing to know with the triage effort, is that, you know, the goal is to take people from brand new contributors through the triager team up to collaborators on a repo, through to like repo owners, up to a technical committee, right? And some people will drop off at each step, but like the goal is to start, you know, building that pathway, right? And so you want to make sure that you are very conscientious of the, you know, talking with the triage team members and making sure they understand how that, you know, how that's going to happen. What level of investment, how is the project run? Like, what level of investment can they expect from the existing people in the project, right? Like, and on Express, that means we were volunteers. Nobody's paid to work on Express. Nobody's working on it full time. So, you know, coming in and saying, well, let's set a schedule is like, well, that's just not going to happen. Like, you know, by all means, if you want to do that and try to keep to it, great, you know, but that you're not going to be able to get, you know, the existing TC members to do that, because they have day jobs, right? And so those kind of things I think are going to happen. But luckily they haven't happened where a triage team member has come in to an issue and had to battle it out with an end user. That, you know, we've luckily been able to avoid that problem. That was a very long answer to that. Sorry, yeah. So anyway.
I think that there have been issues, but I think like Doug has stepped in when he's seen the level of, let's say, ungratitude has reached a certain point.
Yeah. So let's maybe move on to other topics. Are you all right? Or does anybody have any last things to talk about with triage? No? Okay. I put my 2 questions here, but I was hoping we'd get some from the audience. So how do I join the working group? Show up, that's about it. We do have a PR process. It's really loose. I think there will be some small changes once the charter lands, but I don't think it will. And similarly with the PKG.js org, you know, joining the working group is one part, but joining the place where we're actually working on the tools is another. Similarly, we have a process in the charter that we're working on to open a PR to say, hey, can I join the PKG.js org? And right now, I think I'm an admin. I think I just made Dom an admin as well, because he needed some Travis things set up and it didn't work. But I think in the future, we'll also have a management team for that. But it's very open.
I think as part of the chartering, we're defining what that would be, right?
Yep. But right now, like I added Beth on the NPM org, and I added Dom on the GitHub org. It's pretty open. You know, people who are working on things, we want to just enable everybody to be productive. So, does anybody have any questions on those parts? Nope. Okay. So then maybe we can use the last 8 minutes to discuss this, which I think was one thing I take away from Glenn's points is I think we have been doing a better job at engaging the community, but is there a way we could better engage sort of major players? He was saying, enterprise, but it doesn't necessarily need to be enterprise. Like, is there something we can do to better engage GitHub? Is there something we can do to better engage, Microsoft as a whole, who have a lot of open source things? Like, what are the, are there areas where we could help facilitate engagement from companies? I think is a really interesting thing that we haven't talked a lot about in the group.
So it's obvious that we haven't, because the contributors are like a minuscule. It's look at the number of packages downloaded today. So we've really got to come up with ideas for this. It's easy to get people excited about current projects, but one of the things is they don't realize that they will sit on top of existing modules, and those modules need help. And that's the actual message we get out. It's an entire ecosystem. Like the foundations are underpinning quite a lot of things, and people don't know that. There are a lot of dependents out there. And as Michael said, we've got to get the value proposition across to the enterprise and the medium. So, like, if you participate, you have a say, you will be listened to. Like, these are not like dominating leader type organizations that everyone is listened to. So I think it's the value proposition that we've talked about, but we're not going out making that. At least I don't see it being made a lot.
Yeah, it's something we've always had on our radar. We just haven't figured out how to do it yet, I don't think, or maybe not spent enough time. I know that at one point, and I'm going to blank on the name, but there was the thought of, some tooling to help businesses like see all the modules that they were dependent on. And because as I may have said too many times, like, I kind of see it for businesses, it's a risk management thing. It's like understanding we're using this software and how do I manage the risk, which is what a business really does, is a large part of their work. How do I manage that risk, and convincing them that actually getting involved in the open source projects is a good way to help manage that risk. And so it's a win for everybody, but it's also a win very specifically for them on that front. And I think adding to that, the talk by Toby, where he pointed out that it's actually a good way to grow and build the capability of your employees, is actually another very significant part that companies get out of it. It's not just what they give back, but that they're going to bring back ideas, capability to the organization, which is also actually going to be a significant value above just the risk management that you get out of it.
Indeed. Is there anything that the package maintenance team specifically could do to help enable that story to be told to people? Because I think that, that as obviously I agree with all of those things, but like as a team, what can we concretely do to help like push that forward?
It's like, if there are any tools that can help, business understand. That's where, like, I think the support information is one aspect of that, and is something that we are doing, because hopefully that'll help surface more information that makes businesses say, oh, okay, I need to focus here or contribute there. In terms of, I guess individually we can all be advocates within our own companies. And I mean, I think it goes back to something Glenn was saying a little earlier today. In a lot of cases, if we can provide the framework for people to contribute, it's going to make it a lot easier, right? Versus, if an organization is convinced and tells its people to go out and contribute to open source, that can sometimes be hard for individuals to figure out what to do. And, one of the things we had in mind was like a backlog of things that modules needed help with. I think having a very tangible, oh, okay, I've gotten some time, here's a tangible thing I can do, versus having to go and find it, that kind of work and structuring what needs to happen would significantly help.
So what I heard there is we're already working on the things that you think would help, which is a great sign,
on a few of them,
right?
yeah. Like
yeah.
we've got one underway. The other one we've talked about in terms of like how would we surface sort of a global, like a more concrete, here specific things that are a prioritized list of things to help on. You know, I think, as you said, a number of these things are sort of long term. You can't just come in and change everything overnight. So the work we're doing in Express to kind of understand what does work, what kind of, you know, maybe we'll better understand what kind of things could be put onto that queue, right? But, you know, that's sort of, you know, I think in the perfect world, it would be like we have a good way to convince businesses to give people time to work on it. And then those people come to the package maintenance repo and say, oh yeah, this is clearly something I can do, right? And we're not there yet, but working on the things that move us incrementally in that direction is what I think will help.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the part where we're still missing, and we don't even have, I think, a proposal for would be how do they, once they've done that, how do they then go take that back to their managers, their directors, their, you know, teams and say, look, here's what I've done. Like, here's the proof that I went to them. I said, I'm going to do this. Now here's what I did. And here's how it benefited our team or our company. You know, I don't think we have the other end of the.
Yeah. And that's hard. Like I know the risk management side is kind of like insurance. You know, early in my career, I worked for a number of security companies where you're basically selling insurance, and it's a hard sell sometimes, right? Because unless it's in the forefront of people's minds, they're like, you know, I can manage my risk by just taking the risk, or I could spend money, and you know, so that side is always a bit of a challenge because it's not always a fuzzy. We're going to save you X dollars and you can measure it. Similarly, like I think the discussion from the earlier part where it's like making it visible that people have contributed is important too. It's kind of like that, the recognition that people can take back to the organizations is, you know, it's not something you want to make the end goal, but is important in helping to support people to be able to continue to do it long term, right? Like to show that yes, you've come to the package maintenance team, you've made a contribution, and it's just obvious that you have versus having to try and convince people that, you know, that you have.
Yeah, it's very important. A lot of organizations, you know, they want to measure. The first thing they'll ask you, and if you want to organize a conference, or they'll say, well, how do we measure the success of what we've done? And for a lot of things, it's very ephemeral. Like, okay, we're going to do this even though we can't measure it because it's pretty obvious it's good. But for long-term things, for getting engagement long-term, they want to measure. They want to measure improvements, where they're starting. If the contributions are not noted in GitHub somehow, it's going to be very hard for them to measure that level of engagement, especially for junior people on the subjects we've talked about. Once they're committing code, that's fine. But if we look at the entire ecosystem, there's only going to be a small fraction contributing code and many talking about issues, planning things. It will actually reflect what the enterprise does with a number of people writing code, a number of people deciding what to build, a number of people designing it, doing infrastructure.
So before Michael drops, sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but he's the meeting host. It's going to end the recording.
Good point. Let me make somebody else the meeting host.
Well, we can just, we need to end anyway, because I also want to go to the other
okay,
session.
Sure.
So I think we should just end it there. Continue this conversation. Come join the package maintenance meetings. We do them bi-weekly, I think, in alternate time zones. But also asynchronous communication. So if anybody's interested in joining, it's a great low commitment way to start these conversations. So thank you all, and we'll see you all in GitHub issues.
Talk to everybody soon. Bye.
Cheers.